I started this episode with, I don't care if you've been podcasting for a short time or a long time, like you're going to pick up some useful tips in this episode. That was my intro. That was my big promise at the beginning. And that's exactly what you do in your intro. You offer a big promise.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, everybody. Number one, I don't really care too much if you've been podcasting for a short amount of time or a long amount of time. You'll probably pick up a few useful tips from this. So this is pitfall number 22. It's about your podcast process. And one of the pitfalls for podcasters who get that pod fade, or they don't end up podcasting for a long time, or they don't make the money that they wanted, it's probably because they're lacking part of the process. So I've got a few points that we're going to share on this episode, talking about pitfall number 22, your podcast process. And the first one, they're going to go pretty chronological order. Got connecting with your guests, how to automate that, how to automate, inviting your guests, the template emails, the calendar links, all of this process all the way down till it's after the podcast happens and you need to follow up with your guest. So I'm going to share with you our whole process and give you as many useful tips as I can, regardless of if you're about to start a podcast or you've been podcasting for quite some time. So here we go. Connecting with your potential guest is one of the things that people don't really have a process for. And they're nervous about it. They're worried about it. They're thinking to themselves, man, I don't even know how I'm going to connect with guests. I don't even know how I'm going to find guests. And so they have this concern automatically. So I want to give you a few resources to automate this process a little bit easier. So number one, I want to talk about something called PodBooker and PodMatch and Interview Valet and just Facebook and maybe an assistant. So these are some of the ways that I've been able to automate our process. So on PodBooker and PodMatch, what I'll do is I'll have my virtual assistant jump on to each of those and send kind of like a templated email or a templated message to the other person. And it doesn't say that I've listened to their podcast or anything like that. But what it does is my assistant will reach out to them and say something to the effect of, hey, I saw that you had XYZ podcast. That's pretty cool. I was wondering if you'd ever want to do a reciprocal interview. I could have you on my podcast and I could jump on your podcast and we both could grow. Let me know what you think. And we try to keep it as short and concise as possible, but we do that on PodBooker and PodMatch, and those are free. I mean, they have paid versions of it if you need it, but most of the users don't pay. You don't need to pay. So PodBooker, PodMatch, these are good ways of getting in front of the right people. Interview Valet is a paid service. I don't ever remember exactly what they charge, but it's either $300, $500, or $600 per time that they get you on somebody else's podcast. So you might pay, let's just pretend like it's $5,000 up front, and they'll get you on 10 interviews, something like that. But Interview Valet is really, really good, and it can systemize, it can automate that whole process because it'll allow you to be able to get on other people's podcasts without a bunch of your effort. So that's a good automated way, a tool that you can use. So PodBooker, PodMatch, Interview Valet. I like just using Facebook myself. I bring on a lot of guests. So I'll meet somebody on Clubhouse and I'll say, hey, I'd love to have you on my show. Or I'll meet them on Facebook or LinkedIn. And when it's on LinkedIn, for example, or Facebook, I might see somebody in another room adding value to other people. Like if it's a real estate podcast, then I'll go and see people adding value to real estate. And I'll say, man, I like your story. I'd love to support you and put you on my show. Would you like to be a guest? And they almost always say yes. That's the trick. It's amazing. It doesn't even matter how famous they are. They almost always say yes. So I do that a lot on Facebook. I might do that on Clubhouse. And you can also utilize an assistant. So the way that I first got on somebody's podcast, his name's Joe Fairless. Great podcast, by the way. He had this guy working for him, and this guy was doing what I do. His man was jumping into these Facebook groups, seeing who's adding value. And if somebody seemed like they were doing good things, he would reach out and say, "Hey, I'm the person who schedules for Joe Fairless. Would you like to be on his show?" And that's how I got on that show, because Joe was utilizing an assistant who was going into all of these different real estate groups to find me. All right, so that's connecting potential guests. Hopefully, you got a couple of nuggets there. The second piece to automating and systemizing, just making you have a better process for your podcast, is knowing how to invite that person. All right, so you've already connected with them, but how do you invite them? So, what we use to automate this process, we use to simplify it and just make it easier and faster, is on Gmail. Most of you probably use Gmail. I use Gmail personally. So on Gmail, they have this thing. So if you go into the settings, you can actually create what they call a template email. So you got to go into the settings, go in, I think it's like advanced settings, and you just need to say, yes, I want to have these templated emails. And they create these like canned responses where you'll actually write the email one time, and then anytime that you want to go back and email that next guest, you can have all of the information in there that you want to share with them. And you just click the template, you open up the template and you schedule it and you put in that person's name and you push send. It was that easy. So that system really, really, really helps to be able to invite guests onto your show. Some people just go as far as giving the calendar link, but I really like to have this templated email where that email goes out to them and it gives them all the details. Because a lot of your guests are probably going to ask you things like, hey, what questions are you going to ask me? Or how do I do this? Or do I need a mic? And because you have so many guests asking so many questions, it's a lot faster and a better process, SOP, standard operating procedure. It's better for you to end up sending them this templated email that has all the information that they need. So before they even book, they know all of the details. They know all the information. It's going to save you a lot of time because they don't end up asking you those questions because you've answered all of them already. Which kind of leads us into the third point, which is the calendar link. Integrate it with your Zoom if you can. So with the calendar link, I use Calendly, and you can find it, I think it's calendly.com. But I use Calendly, and on there, I have a few questions that I ask each guest automatically. For example, I make sure that they agree that I own the recording. So they literally click a button that says, Adam owns the recording. So when I go on your show, you can use as much of it as you want, and you can use it in books and tapes and all these kind of things. So on my calendar link, it says that. Also on that invitation email that I mentioned a moment ago, it says that. And what's kind of cool is with Calendly, you absolutely can integrate it with your Zoom. So instead of like putting your personalized Zoom link in there and having everybody jump onto your Zoom link at random times and all that, instead, you can actually integrate it where it propagates a brand new, unique Zoom link for them to get on. Now, I don't only recommend Zoom. It's just that I do a lot of interviews every Wednesday. Every Wednesday, I'll usually do somewhere like, let's just say 6, 7, or 8 podcast episodes every single Wednesday. And so for me, I have to have it automated. And that's why I mentioned the Zoom, is because you can easily integrate it with your calendar. The next point that I want to make is auto email follow-up. So when you use Calendly, you actually have the ability to be able to select some tools inside of the Calendly so that after they schedule that event in your calendar at a time that makes sense for you, after they do that, then they actually can get email reminders saying, hey, are you ready for your interview with Adam? And it'll give them all the information that they need. It'll say, hey, it'll help you a lot. So those auto emails have been something that I've used with and integrated it with Calendly or my calendar scheduling link. And you could use Schedule Once, for example. I use Calendly. I love it. So the next point that I want to talk about is the actual interview. A lot of people, they kind of fail at having their podcast because this pitfall of this process, they've missed it. They don't have it. So within the interview, there's really 2 things that I want to support you with right now within the interview, like giving you some systems to think about. One of them is the actual flow of the interview, which basically means you need to understand what questions you might be asking. You might want to know ahead of time if you have like a rapid fire round or if you need to take a break for an episode and how you sign off, for example. So you want to make sure that you have that whole flow ready to go. The other part of the interview is the actual recording. And so I mentioned to you a moment ago that I use Zoom. I think zoom.us. And on top of that, a lot of people, they're going to badmouth Zoom. They're going to say, like, your audio quality is bad, the video quality is bad. I think the audio quality is fine. I think the video quality is fine. And plus, I try to always have a backup recording also. But when you're recording, I use Zoom. You can use, if you want something better than Zoom, then I would suggest that you use Riverside.fm. Now, it's better and it's worse. It's better than Zoom because the audio quality is awesome, the video quality is awesome, and it records locally to your computer. And your guest, it records locally to their computer. And then it automatically, once the file is perfectly intact and has never been messed up because of internet issues, it goes straight up to the cloud all together with either a single track or a multi-track. I recommend you go ahead and just use the multi-track. It's going to benefit you and your editing later on. Or if you have somebody else editing for you, it's going to benefit them. So the questions that you might think about is, am I going to do single track? Am I going to do multi-track? Am I going to record to the cloud or am I going to record locally to my computer? And finally, do I need a backup recording? And I would say, yes, you need a backup recording. And for example, I use this thing called a Rodecaster, and the Rodecaster actually has a place for me to put an SD card inside of it, and it'll record that by itself. I'll be able to record multi-tracks right on the Rodecaster, and also I'll be recording through the Zoom straight to the cloud. So I could use either of those recordings. Another tip or trick that might help you as well when you're recording with a guest is you could ask them, hey, could you record this locally to your computer? And then again, you don't have to worry about all the internet issues. So if you're not like using Riverside.fm, which records it perfectly, then just like me, I use Zoom. Whenever I have a guest who says, do you want me to record this to my computer locally and send you the file? I say, yes, I do. I want you to do that. It's going to help me. So those are the 2 points, the flow of your episode for the interview and the recording process of the episode. There's about 6 more points that I'll make. One is on how to edit and how to systemize and automate your editing process. The next one's going to be the show notes. Then promotional material. I'll teach you some strategies to be able to make those promotional materials a little bit easier, more systemized, more automated, more of a process, more of a standard operating procedure. Also talk about emailing guests like after the fact, after they've been on your show. I'll share with that a little bit on this episode. And I'll also talk about publishing to all the platforms to give you some ways to be able to do that. And then finally, how to market your show. Just listening to Pat Flynn and basically this thing about if you build it, they will come is totally out the window. It does not work. You can't just have a podcast and expect that a lot of people are listening. So I'll be getting into what Pat Flynn said at the end of this episode as well, and being able to squash that. If you build it, they will come, and share with you some easier ways to be able to automate the marketing process of your show so you can have more listeners. So the piece that we're in right now is the editing, or we got finished talking about the recording. Now let's talk about the editing of the podcast. I would just recommend you 100% offload it, and we can help you with that. 100% just offload the editing. Make it easier on yourself. Your time is worth a couple $100 an hour. And if you do your editing, you're doing, $10, $15, $20 an hour work. And so you're actually losing money every hour that you're working. It's just so much better to just completely offload it. But if you don't offload it, here's a few things to think about. You want to have in the editing process, you want to know, where are you going to put that teaser? How long is that teaser going to be? My information that I can give you is that we use a 17-second or less teaser. There's a lot of science behind it. That 17 seconds or less is the right amount. So all these people that are creating teasers that are a minute long, it's just way too long. It doesn't support your podcast. So take that 17 seconds or less out of the middle of the episode and put it in the very, very front of the episode, in the beginning of the episode. And that's going to be the teaser. And pay attention to this for a second. when you do that teaser, 100%, you do not want it to be after anything. That teaser needs to be the first thing ever. So that's part of our process. We put that 17-second or less teaser right in the beginning, and that goes into the recorded intro with the music, that voiceover. And so it goes into that voiceover artist with that recorded, authentic original music for your theme music. And that intro gets into the episode. So if you're doing your introduction of your guest live each and every episode, this is where that's going to go. Or if you're recording it after the fact, this is still where that's going to go. It's going to be a quick intro. And this is after the recorded voiceover intro. There are different types of intros, just so you know. One of them is the standard introduction that all of your podcast episodes have. And the next one is really just that intro of this episode. And with that said, a couple of things that you want to think about that you need to be in there, and pitfalls that I continue to see time and time again, is podcasters who just give a giant, long, and they read it too. They just give the bio of the person. This person graduated from Harvard Business School of Law. This person did this. And they just keep going and going and going and going about like all of these details that don't matter to you. And it's the best radio station ever. What's in it for me? What's in it for me? Your listener wants to know what's in it for them. They don't want to just hear this whole long bio. They really want you to start that intro with what you're going to get out of the episode. For example, I started this episode with, I don't care if you've been podcasting for a short time or a long time, like you're going to pick up some useful tips in this episode. That was my, intro. That was my big promise at the beginning. And that's exactly what you do in your intro. You offer a big promise. What is the listener, WIIFM, what's in it for me? What is the listener going to get by listening to this podcast, by investing their time with you today? If you start off with this long, drawn out bio of your guest, they don't know what they're going to get out of it. It doesn't help. So you say, in this podcast episode, we're going to give you X, Y, and Z. And then you give it to them. You have to fulfill that promise. So other parts of the editing that you might put in is after that intro, it'll go into the regular episode. Then you might have a commercial break. So if you have a commercial break, figure it out ahead of time and maybe say, hey, let's stop right there and we'll be right back. A big thing that I hear a lot of people doing is they want a commercial in the middle of their episode, but they never break for a commercial. And the problem is they're in the middle of asking questions and getting answers with their guest, for example. And then whoever's editing that has nowhere specific to put that commercial. And so they just splice it in wherever they want. And it totally distracts from the episode. So my suggestion is the commercial break comes in after the main part of the episode and before you have like a rapid fire round, a lightning round, a final five, whatever you call it. Generally, you'll have something at the end which you ask all of your guests. One good thing is asking them what book they recommend, for example. So you have that commercial break. You say, awesome, I love where this has been. And I can't wait to get into the rapid fire round with you. But let's take a quick break and we'll dive into your answers. And then you have the commercial and then you jump right in. And we're back with Anderson, whatever, your guest. We're back with him or her. And let's jump into the rapid fire round. And then you just ask those questions. And then that goes into the outro. And then that goes into a call to action. You've got to figure that out ahead of time. All right, with show notes, we systemize our show notes. Other people are thinking about like writing their show notes, figuring out their show notes. So I'm going to give you the 6-part system that we use. There's 6 different parts. They're very specific and they go in a very specific order. I want to share that system with you, that process with you, that standard operating procedure with you, so that you don't have to be stressed out. How do I start the show notes? What should be first? What should be last? What should be in the middle? What should I hit on? What shouldn't I? So here's the 6 parts that we use for our show notes. We start with a summation. So there's a show note summary. There's a summary of the episode. The key point is that it's only 1 paragraph long. It's only just 1 paragraph. It's not a giant, description. It's how do I sum this up in just 1 paragraph? Maybe like 3 quick sentences. And after that, then Part 2 is, what do you listen for? What should the listener be watching out for? What will they learn from the episode? And then you do part 2 of the show notes with bullet points. And you want it to be SEO driven, like search engine optimization driven. You want to make sure you're hitting on key points. But one of the most important parts to this part of the show notes, what the guest listens for, you don't answer the questions, you ask the questions. You don't give them everything. You really are trying to have them have some curiosity. Oh, I got to listen to that. So instead of saying, on this episode, Adam taught this point, and then you give them the point, and this point, and then you give them all of the details, and then this point, or like how to raise money for your real estate transaction or something like that. Adam gave the 3 different parts that you need in order to raise money. Listen here. Instead of like, you need to do this to raise money, this to raise money, and this to raise money, for example. So within those bullet points, you want it to be more proposing the question, getting people excited about wanting to listen, getting them curious about, ooh, that might be something I want to check out. And then part 3, after you do these bullet points, part 3 is the resources from the episode. So in case you ever mentioned, like, for example, on this episode, I've already mentioned Riverside.fm. I've already mentioned like Zoom.us. I've already mentioned a few others, and I'm going to mention more right after this. This is the piece in your show notes where all of that goes. All of the resources is part 3. Part 4 is the guest bio. A lot of people, like when they do their show notes, all they do is a guest bio. It doesn't tell them anything about what they're going to get. It doesn't get them curious or excited about listening in. All they're giving is a guest bio. So this is part 4 of our 6-part system. And then part 5 is connecting with us. What that means is you want your listener to connect with you. So yes, you told them everything that they would get. You gave them a bio for your guest. But you also want them to connect with you specifically. So part 5 of the show notes is, how do you get a hold of Adam Adams? So that goes into the show notes. Additionally, with your sponsored ads, this comes into part 6. So you give all the information if you have a sponsor. If you don't have a sponsor, then you only have 5 parts. If you have a sponsor, you put that 6th part. And oftentimes, if you don't have somebody else paying to be your sponsor, you should be your sponsor. So you might say something to the effect of, buy my product here, get more swag here, connect with me here. You might want to make sure that you have something in there, a little call to action, a lead magnet, something like that to really support you. After that is you got to do the promotional material. So here's a couple of hacks for you. With the promotional material, here's 2 websites that are going to be in the show notes of this too. It's Canva. I think that's at canva.com, and Headliner. I don't remember if it's headliner.io or what, but I'll make sure that goes in the show notes, for example. So Canva is what helps you to be able to easily, even if you're not an artist, and I think they've got free versions as well, like total free versions. You don't have to pay for anything to use it. And you'll create a template, and you can create quote cards, like for your guest. If they said a really interesting quote, you can put a little quote card for them. You can also create other types of thumbnails for like YouTube and all of that. And it could be done for free, and it's on Canva. And the other thing that I'll share with you to create promotional materials is Headliner. Headliner is pretty neat. It allows you to be able to create those audiograms I told you about before. Or actually, I mentioned the teaser, which is 17 seconds or less. But what we do is we create the same clip that made the teaser also goes to the Headliner, and we create a 17-second or less teaser. This teaser can then later on get published on your social media and things like that. Or your guest might share that 17-second audiogram with their audience. So that's just how to help you a little bit with your promotional material, Canva, Headliner, etc. Also, you want to automate emailing the guest afterward. I'm going to give you our system. It's a 3-punch system, jab, jab, right hook. So punch number 1 is, as you're editing the podcast episode, you might just have a few takeaways as you're creating like the show notes and everything like that. And so you reach out to your guest and you say, "Hey, I just edited all of this. I'm going to let you know. And I loved it. You're a great guest. And I'll definitely let you know when it's going to be coming out. So watch out for my email." So that's the first of 3 emails. The second of 3 emails, where you're going to actually reach out to them the day before the episode goes live. And you say, "Hey, good news. Good news, John. Good news, Sarah. Your episode goes live tomorrow. As a reminder, like I loved this episode and I'm so excited to have this. So watch out for my email tomorrow. That's going to give you the links that you can share and also some promotional materials that I created through Canva or Headliner." And then the third email is going to be the day of launch. Now, the podcast is launched, it's aired, it's up and running on all of the platforms. So you'll send them that third email that says something, "Hey, your episode is live and performing well. Thank you for coming on. Here's the promotional material that you could share with your audience." Because of the 3 different emails, we tend to get a lot more of our guests actually sharing that. With only 1 email, they don't share it nearly as much. So I hope that helps. Next part, after the emailing the guests those 3 different times and getting it systemized. And again, I'm going back to something I said in the beginning. If you have Gmail, use those templated emails to get those 3 emails started. And you can schedule them at the bottom left-hand corner of your Gmail, right by the send button. There's like an up arrow or a down arrow, but you'll click that little triangle and it'll allow you to be able to schedule that out. So you can actually do it all at the same time. Like you just edit it. Now you send the first one and then you schedule the next one for the day before it comes out. And you schedule the third one for the day that it does come out. So that could really help you. Then we're talking about publishing it to all of the platforms. And so, just a little trick here, if you don't already know this, all of the platforms, all of the hosting platforms like Libsyn and Buzzsprout, and there's more, Libsyn, Buzzsprout, I don't remember all of them right now. We help about 45 clients right now, and they all use all sorts of different ones, but most of them are using Libsyn and Buzzsprout and Captivate. There's a couple others. But with that said, when you publish on those platforms, it'll syndicate it out to almost every platform out there. Maybe it's not going to go to like Amazon, Alexa, but it will publish to almost every platform out there. Yes, iHeart, Apple, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, all of them. So if you ever see this free service called Anchor, and you're like, "Well, I have to use Anchor because they say if I use them, it's going to publish everywhere." Well, look, any platform that you use, it publishes anywhere. So I personally would recommend that you spend money for your hosting platform. It's only like $20 a month. So if you got $20 a month, I would definitely go for the paid version. There's a lot of other benefits. Why? As far as publishing on all the platforms, most of these hosting platforms will put it everywhere. It'll syndicate it out. And then finally, this is the last point, is you should be marketing your show. So this is that point where I was just a moment ago, I was watching a video where Pat Flynn was being interviewed by one of the higher ups at Buzzsprout. And during that interview, Pat Flynn mentioned that you have to market your show. He sees all these people that have shows, but they just don't have any listeners. And like he's saying, the real reason why you don't have those listeners is because you're not marketing. And I thought this too. Like in the beginning, I was like, if you build it, they will come. So I started a podcast called Creative Real Estate Podcast, and I was having like around 20 downloads per episode. And it was embarrassing. It was a lot of work. And I just wanted to quit. I didn't want to do it anymore. And it wasn't until over a year into it that I realized, hey, that was BS. If you build it, they will come. That was BS. Like, why does everybody teach you that and tell you that? I've got to take matters into my own hands. I was reading a book back then from Grant Cardone, 10X Rule. And the 10X Rule focuses on, look, try it all, start it all, attempt it all, focus on it all, do it 10 times harder. And if you do, it's going to grow. And I remember that I decided at that time that, hey, I'm going to try to upgrade my my marketing. So I did a lot of free marketing, and I want to give you a few tips. One of the tips is what I'm doing right now. So I'm actually going live on Clubhouse. I'm live on Facebook. I can't see how many people are on Facebook right now, but I'm live on Clubhouse. I'm live on Facebook. And so I'm getting the extra added exposure of recording this episode while also getting the extra added exposure of Facebook's own algorithm. Because with Facebook and many other social media platforms, if you do those features like their lives and their stories and their reels, when you're doing these new features of the platform, they promote you even more. And so I'm getting this added benefit right now by recording the episode and having it in both of those other places at the same time. So that's one way to market your show. Another way to market your show is to get your guests to market it for you. And the way that you do that is following our 3-step email process that I gave you just a couple minutes ago. Other additional ways that you can market your podcast is we end up putting banner ads up on different blogs. So industry related blog like you have, you pay just to have it up there for a couple of months. And quick tip, if you do 6 months at a time, you get a discount. They usually give you a discount. So a lot of times I'll do a banner ad for an industry related blog, and I'll do a banner ad for where podcast listeners go. So there's this bigger podcast listener group where the guy who owns it is huge into SEO. I pay him to put my podcast in front of his audience, and it's not very expensive, and my audience grows and grows and grows. We also do that for a lot of other people. Like when I mentioned that I serve 45 different podcasters right now, 45 different shows, almost, I think it's like 16 of them. So a little less than half of them are marketing only clients that we just do marketing for. Eric Olson on the Facebook Live says, was scrolling through, thought I would sit down for a few minutes, and he's getting tremendous value. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate your live comment on Facebook. And as far as marketing, other things that you could do, one of them is you can go in. This is something we're doing for a client of ours. His name's Corey Peterson. He's an apartment investor, and he has a podcast, an awesome podcast. Go and check it out. Please go and check it out. Corey's podcast is called the Multifamily Legacy Podcast. And one thing that we're doing with him right now is, I believe it's episode 61 and episode 88. I'm doing this off of memory, but episode 61 and episode 88 are his most popular podcast episodes on his whole show. And so what we're doing is we're taking a little clip, like an audiogram, like a videogram. And if you don't know what that is, go ahead and just search for it, look for it, Google it, and learn what it is. You need them. It's important. But what we're doing is we're taking one clip from episode 61, one clip from episode 88, and we're split testing all of these different things with paid Facebook marketing. So it basically looks like this. You have the episode itself where it's a full, like, let's call it a 35-minute episode. And then we take that short clip, and for these ads, we just want them to be under 60 seconds. So even though I told you earlier, the math says 17 seconds or less, in this case, we're going to go 60 seconds or less for the advertisement. So we want it to be as short as possible, but it needs two things. A, it needs to pack a lot of value. That little 1 minute or less clip has to actually have value in and of itself. That's critical. The other thing that we want in there is to incite curiosity. So it needs to add value, give and give and give, not just be a sales pitch, but also have a little bit of something that is left in the tank. So somebody says, wow, that was really good. I want the rest. That was really good. That 17 seconds, that 20 seconds, whatever, because it's 60 seconds or less. That was really good. I want the rest. So you'll incite curiosity with it. And there's a call to action. All it basically says on these ads, and we're split testing 5 different options for it. What it needs to say is, for the rest, to listen to the rest of this episode, for more, click below. And so it just has a direct link to the podcast episode. So it gets them fired up. It's somebody who doesn't already listen to the podcast. They hear a bite, they get excited, and then they go in. And we have all sorts of other marketing strategies as well. It would take too long for me to share all of marketing strategies, but the ones that I shared by industry-related blogs, podcast listener blogs, and the other one where you take an audiogram or videogram or a still image and you publish a little bit about that episode, what's in it for me. You want that listener to think about that. And then you give a call to action, go here to listen to the rest. So that's a little bit of how to systemize and automate your pod process so it doesn't suck anymore. And if you missed any of this, go back, listen to it again. I really, truly believe, just like Eric mentioned, thank you, Eric, that there's a lot of value in this episode. A lot of value. So thank you so much. And I'm out. This is serious. Don't go. Now that you've gotten whatever value that you feel that you got, the actionable takeaways, you need to implement the stuff that you learned. If you remember me talking about bird church once, and they learn how to fly, and then they walk home, I don't want you to walk home. I want you to fly home. So take the steps, take the actionable steps for your benefit so that you can become a better podcaster. That's the only thing that I ask of you. And I'll see you for more actionable tips on the very next episode.